The afternoon sun slanted through the living room windows, painting the beige walls in warm light. I sat at the kitchen table, phone in hand, staring at the notification that had just appeared. Deposit 3,400. 45 years as a school secretary distilled into a single monthly sum. The reward for a lifetime of early mornings, skipped vacations, and the quiet pride of doing things right. For a moment, I let myself imagine using it for something that was mine alone, a short trip, maybe a new coat to replace the one I had worn for 10 winters. The fantasy evaporated with my daughter's voice. 90% of your retirement is for this house. The rest. Don't waste it, old woman. Miranda stood in the doorway with her arms folded, her tone carrying the sharp edge of ownership rather than request. Caleb followed a moment later, calm in a way that made my stomach tighten, and placed a paper on the table in front of me. You can sign today and make it official, he said smoothly, sliding the form toward me. It was a bank authorization granting them full access to my account. His thumb tapped the signature line as though this were a natural next step in our lives. My hands didn't move. I wasn't afraid. I felt something colder, clearer, like a glass of water after a long walk in the heat. I glanced around the living room, the same room where I had celebrated Miranda's birthdays, where my late husband's laughter once echoed. Not a single photo of me remained. On the walls were their wedding pictures, family vacations, Lily in her dance recital. But not one frame with my face. It no longer felt like my home. Lily skipped in, her voice as bright as sunlight. Mom says this is basically our house now. I met her innocent eyes and managed to smile. My fingers brushed the paper on the table, feeling the weight of what they were asking me to surrender. Slowly, deliberately, I folded the authorization form and set it aside. The silence stretched. I let it hang there as if the air itself had thickened. Miranda frowned, ready to speak again, but I rose from my chair instead, the faint ache in my knees grounding me. I walked toward my bedroom without a word, the folded paper in my hand and a quiet ember of something new burning in my chest. It was small, almost fragile, but I knew I would carry it with me into tomorrow. The next morning, I moved through the house as if seeing it for the first time. My slippers slid across hardwood floors that no longer held the warmth of memory, only the echo of other people's lives. Caleb's jackets were draped over my late husband Arthur's armchair, the one he had read the newspaper in every Sunday, tapping his finger to the rhythm of the headlines. Now the chair looked like a coat rack stripped of the person who had given it meaning. In the kitchen, pause gadgets, air fryer, espresso machine, blender the size of a small engine, crowded the counters. My old blue mug, the one Arthur bought me on a trip to Portland, was gone. I opened 3 cabinets before I found it, shoved in the back behind a stack of novelty cups with cartoon foxes and inspirational quotes. It was a small thing, but it felt like my life had been quietly boxed and stored away. Miranda appeared holding her phone as if it were an extension of her hand. You live here, eat here, use the water and gas, she said without looking up. It's only fair you contribute 90%. Her voice was casual, like she was reciting the weather, as if the number had been carved into law. I nodded slowly, saying nothing, letting her words settle. 90% of everything I had worked for just to be tolerated in the house my husband and I had built together. I felt like a tenant in my own home, permitted to exist but expected to stay quiet, to keep paying rent in the currency of obedience. I stepped out to the porch to breathe. My fingers brushed the wooden railing Arthur had built by hand 30 years ago. I remembered the summer sun glinting on his sweaty brow as he measured each plank, whistling a tune I can still hum. He had built this for us for family dinners and lazy evening talks. Standing there now, surrounded by wind chimes Paula had chosen online, I felt like an intruder, visiting a memory that no longer belonged to me. A quiet resolve settled in my chest. As I turned back inside, each step heavier than the last, I was already thinking of what I would need to reclaim before it was gone for good. I sat on the edge of my bed, the folded bank form still on the nightstand like a quiet accusation. The house hummed with the sounds of other lives, Caleb's voice on a work call, the thump of Lily's footsteps in the hallway. But in my room, There was only the echo of my own memories. After Arthur died, Miranda was just 12. I worked double shifts as a school secretary, filling in for absent staff, taking extra evening duties, anything that paid a little more. Vacations were dreams reserved for other families. Our summer trips were to the local library or the free concerts in the park, where I'd pack peanut butter sandwiches and call it an adventure. Yet I made every birthday matter. I baked cakes shaped like superheroes and once a crooked piano for her 8th birthday because she swore she'd be a musician. I saved for months to buy her first car, a dusty blue Honda. And I co-signed the mortgage when she and Caleb bought this very house. Every time she needed something, I said yes because that was what mothers did. Maybe that's why the insult didn't knock the wind out of me. I had trained myself to give and expect nothing in return. Gratitude was a luxury I stopped hoping for after the first few years alone. My love had been a steady river running quietly, carving out everything I had until there was little left for me. I picked up my phone and scrolled to Ivy Moreno's name. Ivy had been my neighbor decades ago, and now she was my lifeline, a woman who knew what it meant to survive on your own strength. My fingers trembled as I typed, "Can you talk? I need to tell someone what just happened." Her reply came almost instantly, "Call me. I'm here." I exhaled slowly, realizing my throat was tight. Telling Ivy was the first step to admitting the truth to myself that I was tired of disappearing in a house I helped build. Tired of giving everything and holding nothing. I leaned back against the headboard, the weight of 70 years pressing into me, and felt a small sharp shift inside, like a crack in a wall that had been holding too long. The sky was just beginning to pale when I met Ivy at the park. The grass was damp with dew, and the air carried that early stillness that makes every sound feel intimate. We walked the familiar loop in silence for a while, my hands deep in my jacket pockets, my thoughts heavier than the clouds above us. Finally, I told her everything. The bank formed Miranda's words the way Caleb had pushed it toward me like a contract for surrender. I even told her about Lily's innocent voice, saying the house was basically theirs now. Speaking it aloud felt like lifting a stone off my chest, only to feel the bruising underneath. Ivy stopped near the bench where we used to watch our kids play decades ago. She studied my face for a long moment and said softly, "You've been the foundation for everyone else. Maybe it's time to build your own life." The words sank into me like warm water seeping into cold hands. I nodded more to myself than to her. That evening, after the house settled into its usual rhythm, Lily in bed, Miranda scrolling on her phone, Caleb watching the news, I closed my bedroom door and opened my laptop. I searched for everything I had never dared to before. How to remove joint access from a bank account, how to change mailing addresses, senior housing options in nearby towns. Each page I clicked felt like a quiet rebellion, a step toward air I hadn't breathed in years. I pulled out a blank notebook from my dresser and wrote on the first page, "Freedom Notebook, March 2025. Below it, I started a list. I paused, listening to the muffled television laughter in the living room. My pen hovered. Then I wrote the last item in careful letters. Decide when to leave. Later, standing by my window, I looked across the street at a neighbor's small, quiet house, its porch light glowing in the dark. For the first time, I imagined my own space, one where I answered to no one. The thought startled me with its sweetness, and I realized I was already beginning to picture myself walking away. The house was silent, except for the distant hum of the refrigerator. Miranda had taken Lily to a birthday party, and Caleb was out running errands. It was the first time in weeks I had the place to myself. I stood in the hallway, staring at the closed door of the small study they called an office. My hand hesitated on the knob before I turned it. Inside, the smell of paper and printer ink hung in the air. Their desk was neat on the surface, but I had lived long enough to know that the real story of a family hides in the drawers. I opened the top one and sifted through envelopes until a stack of crisp statements caught my eye. Credit cards. So many. I read the balances, my eyes moving from one page to the next. $22,000, $34,000, $19,500. When I added them together, the total made my chest tighten. $137,000 in debt. My hands were steady, but inside something shifted from sadness to a cold, sharp awareness. Then I saw a loan application with my name typed neatly at the top. Approved 2 years ago. My social security number scrolled in the box for the cosigner. Caleb's signature at the bottom, a loan I had never agreed to. I didn't feel the explosion of rage I might have expected. Instead, a calm clarity settled over me as if the truth had finally crystallized into something I could hold. They had not only dismissed me, they had used me. Quietly, I took photos of everything with my phone one by one, creating a private record of betrayal. That evening, I drove to a small department store in the next town over. The act felt like slipping into a different version of myself. I bought a navy blouse that draped softly at the shoulders and a pair of silver earrings that caught the light. It was the first purchase I had made in years purely for me, and it felt like a small door opening. Driving home in the fading daylight, I felt a steadiness settle into my bones. If they saw me as their bank, I was starting to understand that a bank could decide to close its doors. The morning they insisted we go to the bank, I dressed in my new navy blouse and silver earrings. Miranda gave me a sideways glance in the car, trying to look fancy for paperwork. "Mom," she muttered. I only smiled and watched the town pass by my window. Caleb walked into the bank as if he owned it. "Well, get this done quickly," he said. "Once the 90% is set up, everything will run smoother." Inside, the air was cool and smelled faintly of sanitizer. A young banker led us to her desk. Caleb explained confidently, "We're here to add me as an authorized manager and set up an automatic transfer for her retirement. 90% to the house account, 10% to her." The banker typed for a moment, then frowned. "I'm sorry, sir," she said. "You are no longer authorized on this account." Caleb blinked. "That can't be right. I've had access for years." She shook her head. "Authorization was removed earlier this week. Mrs. Alden is the sole account holder." Miranda whipped her head toward me. "Mom, what did you do?" I met her eyes, my voice steady. "I'm taking 100%. You'll pay every bill alone." Silence settled over the cubicle. Caleb's face flushed deep red. Miranda gaped, and the banker looked down at her keyboard. I stood, thanked her, and walked toward the glass doors. Outside, the sun hit my face with a warmth I hadn't felt in years. Each step toward the car felt lighter, like I had just set down a weight I didn't realize I was carrying. For the first time in my life, I had openly seized my autonomy. I didn't glance back at them. I walked along the sidewalk, shoulders square, already thinking about the next step I would take. That night, I closed my bedroom door and leaned against it, listening to the muted hum of the television downstairs. My hands didn't shake as I opened the closet and pulled out my small rolling suitcase. I knew exactly what I would take and what I would leave behind. I folded a week's worth of clothes with slow precision, setting aside the soft sweaters and the jeans I still liked. My jewelry box fit neatly on top, though it held only a few modest pieces. My wedding band, a pair of pearl earrings, and a thin silver chain Arthur had given me for our 25th anniversary. I slipped family documents into a folder, my birth certificate, social security card, and the deed to the house that was still in my name. On the dresser, I paused over a photograph of Arthur, holding a laughing lily on his shoulders. That picture went into the suitcase, too. The furniture stayed where it was, the heavy dresser Arthur built, the dining table worn smooth by decades of meals, and the sagging sofa where I had napped after long workdays. All of it belonged to the life I was leaving behind. It was the furniture of servitude, reminders of years spent bending to everyone else's needs. I sat on the edge of the bed and dialed Ivy. She answered on the first ring. "Tomorrow," I said, my voice steady. "I'm moving into Riverside Senior Community." She let out a soft cheer. "About time you start living for you, Clarice." When the house fell silent, I stepped into the kitchen. The moonlight stretched across the counters where I had prepared countless meals, wiped up spills, and quietly listened to other people's laughter. I ran my hand along the smooth edge of the counter and whispered goodbye. Upstairs, the faint sound of Miranda's laughter filtered through the ceiling, but it no longer held me. I turned off the light, walked back to my room, and zipped the suitcase closed, already feeling the pull of a new life waiting just beyond the front door. The next morning, Ivy's car pulled up to Riverside's senior community, and I stepped out with my small suitcase in hand. The air smelled of cut grass and faint blossoms from the courtyard, a scent of new beginnings. My apartment was on the second floor, a compact space with a little balcony that overlooked a green lawn dotted with benches and flower beds. As I slid the key into the door and stepped inside, a sense of quiet ownership washed over me. Everything in the apartment was simple and mine: a single sofa, a small dining table, and light filtering in through wide windows. I opened the balcony door, and a soft breeze lifted the curtains as if the space itself was breathing with me. A knock on the open door made me turn. A man with silver hair and kind eyes leaned casually on the doorframe. "Walter Pierce," he said with a grin. "Next door. Freedom looks good on you." I laughed, surprised at how natural it felt. "Thank you, Walter. It feels strange, but good." After he left, I unpacked slowly, letting each item claim its place. That night, I slept with the window open, listening to the gentle hush of the courtyard instead of the constant noise of a house that wasn't mine anymore. The first morning alone, I brewed coffee in a small ceramic pot and carried the mug to the balcony. The sun spilled across my face, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was rushing or hiding. I took a slow sip and let the warmth spread through me. The fear that had been clinging to my ribs for weeks began to melt, replaced by a quiet exhilaration. I pulled out my phone and typed a short message to Miranda. "Safe. Happy Mom." I set the phone aside and breathed in the morning air, letting the weight of obligation slide off my shoulders. The thought drifted through my mind, sharp and clear. I had left the house behind, and without me, it was nothing but walls and bills waiting to close in. 3 weeks passed in a quiet rhythm I had never known. Mornings on the balcony, coffee in hand. Afternoons reading or walking the garden paths with Ivy. Evenings sometimes spent with Walter, who had a talent for making me laugh without trying. My days were my own, and each sunrise felt like a gift I had finally allowed myself to open. Then the phone rang. Miranda's voice trembled on the other end. "Mom, we need help. The bills, the cards, we're drowning." I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of her words settle. I thought of the bank form for the 90% they had tried to claim of the loan they had taken using my name. A piece of me still ached for her. The same piece that had packed lunches and stayed up with fevers, but it no longer controlled me. "I help those who ask with respect," I said evenly, "not those who command." She was silent for a long moment. I could almost hear her swallowing pride. She wasn't ready to release. We said goodbye without promises. When the line went dead, I felt a pang of pity, but no guilt. I had earned this peace one careful decision at a time. A few days later, Lily came to visit. Her small hands clutched a sketchbook she wanted to show me. We sat on my balcony as she drew the fountain in the courtyard, her tongue peeking out in concentration. "Grandma," she said suddenly, "it's fun visiting here. Can we stay longer next time?" I smiled and tucked a stray curl behind her ear. That simple sentence warmed me more than any apology could. Real love didn't need to be demanded or purchased. It came willingly, like sunlight finding a window. As the day faded, Lily's laughter echoed through my apartment, filling the space with something pure. Watching her twirl across the rug, I understood with absolute clarity that the bridge to my heart wasn't made of money or obligation. It was built from respect freely given. I wondered if Miranda would ever be willing to cross it. 6 months later, my apartment had become a place of warmth and laughter, a world entirely my own. Lily stayed with me for the weekend, her little suitcase rolling across my floor like it belonged here. We baked cookies in my compact kitchen, the scent of sugar and butter filling the space, and then curled up on the sofa to watch old black and white movies. She giggled at the overdramatic chase scenes and fell asleep with her head against my shoulder. The next morning, Walter and I strolled through the garden paths, mugs of tea warming our hands. The roses were in bloom, and the sound of the fountain blended with the faint chatter of other residents. He talked about a book he was reading. I told him about the trip Ivy and I were planning to New England in the fall. The world felt wide and open, and yet I was firmly at its center. For the first time in my life, I had sold the old house to Miranda and Caleb on a proper mortgage, the kind that came with responsibility instead of assumption. It was still mine in the ways that mattered most through memory and history. But now it was also a lesson they had to live in. They would either carry it with respect or watch it swallow them in bills. Travel plans with Ivy lined my calendar. There would be train rides, seaside walks, and maybe even the courage to finally cross the Atlantic next spring. I thought of the life I had before, small, quiet, obedient, and I felt a surge of gratitude for the courage that had pushed me out of it. Standing on my balcony as the sun dipped behind the trees, I watched Lily chase fireflies on the lawn with the other children visiting that weekend. My heart felt steady, alive, and entirely my own. They had once called me old and useless, but I was just sharpening my freedom.